everyone, it's 7 o'clock here in the UK. You are very welcome to spend your breakfast with us here at Sky News this morning. Questions this morning over whether an entire school class should have to self-isolate if just one pupil tests positive for COVID. We'll be discussing with the school's Minister, Nick Gibb, who is on the programme very shortly, plus a new plea from travel agents to add more countries to the green list. We're joined by the boss of Blue Bay Travel and the Shadow Transport Secretary, Jim McMahon. Also to come, 25 years on, Gareth Southgate returns to Wembley as England attempt to break their German hoodoo. We'll hear from fans gearing up for tonight's big game to see if Harry Kane can finally work his magic. Two Harrys, though, making the headlines for you today. This one as well.
My brother and I are recognising what would have been our mum's 60th birthday, and she would be so proud of you all for living an authentic life with purpose and with compassion for others.
This from a prince with a message from his mum for young people, from him and his brother. It's Tuesday, the 29th of June. Sky News understands ministers are looking at alternatives to self-isolation rules in schools. Disgusting condemnation from the vaccines minister as police investigate this incident involving the chief medical officer, Chris Whitty. England prepares to face their most formidable foe, Germany, but can they put the heartache of 96 behind them?
I think you can make these things as big in your head as you want, really. It's a game of football. These boys have played hundreds of them.
Yeah, but not like this one. A decision day in Ireland on whether to delay lifting lockdown. It could be left as the only country in the EU to still ban indoor dining. We're live in Dublin. And attempting to cool down, America's Pacific Northwest has been sweltering under a dangerous and unprecedented heat wave, with Canada recording its all-time hottest day.
And it's pretty warm over northern and western parts here too, where the best of the sunshine is. Further south, more in the way of cloud, patchy rain and drizzle. Whether it's football or tennis that you're watching, could be a bit grey this afternoon. All the weather details coming up a little bit later.
Good morning. A big stress if you're a parent. Is your child having to self-isolate just because one pupil in their class has tested positive for COVID-19? But could a change be on the cards? We've got some breaking news to bring you. Tamara's here. Good morning. Tell us more.
Morning, Kay. Well, I understand that the government are urgently looking at alternatives to this 10-day self-isolation policy. Any parent or teacher will know that they live at the mercy of a phone call from the school saying someone in the bubble, which can be a class or an entire year group, has tested positive. Everyone has to stay at home for 10 days. It's been hugely disruptive to children's education. And in fact, last week, 250,000 children were off school for this reason, the most since schools reopened in March. And there's a feeling among ministers that something needs to be done about it. There is actually a pilot underway in some schools to do daily testing instead. And we should be getting some results from that in not too long. So that is one alternative. Nothing has been confirmed yet, but the new Health Secretary, Sajid Javid, was certainly telling MPs yesterday that he had asked his officials to take a fresh look at this policy.
OK, lovely. For now, thanks so much indeed. Let's bring in the schools minister, shall we? Nick Gibb. Mr Gibb, a very good morning to you. Thank you for joining us on the programme this morning. So tell us, are we going to get rid of these kids having to stay home if one person in the class tests positive?
Well, we have, as your reporter says, we are conducting trials of daily contact testing as a possible alternative to self-isolation. What matters also is that we keep the schools safe. And if you go around our schools, you will see a raft of measures to reduce the infection rates within schools. So there's extra hygiene, there's staggered breaks, we keep children in bubbles, and there's extra ventilation in classrooms to minimise the risk of transmission. There are about 3% of students who are self-isolating at the moment, and that's lower than it was in the autumn. And it tends to correlate with the number of infections in the community. But, you know, children are testing at home twice a week. It's very important that families continue to test their children twice a week so we can identify children who do have COVID and then they don't come into the school and spread that virus to other children.
So is that a yes?
No, we'll look at the results of the trial, and we'll make any decisions will be announced before we make a decision on step 4 going forward. But, we have to do everything we can to minimise the risk of transmission of this virus, and that's why all those measures have been taken within schools to keep children and staff safe.
So we'll know by the 19th of July?
Yes, we will. And we've also written to schools yesterday asking them to prepare for 2 tests to take place on the school premises as a way of preparing for that when we come back in September. What we're also concerned about is having more children in school. We want children to be in school. That's why schools opened on the 8th of March. It's why we prioritise education. So the schools will be last to close, first to open as we deal with this dreadful virus and this pandemic, because we do know that children are better for their well-being, for their health, for their education by being in schools. And again, that's why we have the twice-weekly testing, and it's why we have all the raft of control measures within the school premises to minimise the risk of transmission of the virus.
Yeah, it's not working though, is it? 93,000 young people have failed to return to full-time education after schools reopened their doors. What are you going to do about that?
Well, this is an issue that's always worried us. That's about 30,000 more than you see in a normal non-pandemic year. These are vulnerable children. We want them in school. When the lockdown occurred in March, we took extra measures to get schools to talk to the parents of those disengaged children who are not coming into school. Schools remained open, of course, if you remember, for vulnerable children and the children of critical workers. And where we weren't seeing those families sending their children into school, the school would contact the families. We would work with our regional teams at local authority level to talk to those families via social workers and so on, to help do everything we can to encourage those children to come into school.
Perhaps extending the school day by half an hour. Is that going to happen from September?
Well, catch up, of course, is very important. Even as early as June last year, the Prime Minister announced £1 billion of funding for catch up, for money to schools to spend as they felt appropriate to help children to catch up. Also, the National Tutoring Programme was introduced back in June last year. And we've earlier in June, we announced another 1.4 billion, bringing the total together with a February announcement up to over £3 billion of catch up. And that includes money also to help for teachers to be the best that they can through extra CPD and training, because we know that the best catch-up, of course, Kay, happens every day in school with children at school in those classrooms. But we're also conducting a review right now of the evidence about extending the school day and time spent in school to understand how that would work, how effective it would be if we were to increase the length of the school day.
OK, the other thing you're looking at is mobile-free school days. I mean, schools already have very robust policies in place when it comes to the use of mobiles. They know what they're doing, don't they?
A number of schools, an increasing number of schools, are banning mobile phones from the school day, keeping them out of the classrooms. They are a distraction. There is evidence that they improve attainment, particularly children, less academic children do better if they're not distracted by mobile phones. Countries like France banned mobile phones from schools 2 or 3 years ago. And I've always been in favour of banning mobile phones from the classroom. They also can affect children's mental health and their well-being if they're continually spending too much time on the screen. In our curriculum on relationship and health education, we ask teachers to teach children the importance of rationing the use of mobile phones, so they are spending time outside with friends, doing their homework, talking to their parents, and not always glued to their mobile phones. So yes, we do want to ban mobile phones from the classroom, but we are today launching a call for evidence to see how best to implement such a policy, and also other measures we want to take to ensure that we eliminate low-level disruption in our classroom, get rid of bullying in our classrooms. We want children to have a happy, safe time at school. And building on the work we've conducted over the last 10 years to give teachers more power, more control over the classroom. This is going a step further now to make sure that every classroom is safe and a happy place.
As you know, the teachers' unions have said that they already do that, so they're not quite sure why you're saying that this morning. Something else that you had said that pupils don't need from the 17th of May was masks in schools, and as a result, we've seen the number of kids that have tested positive going up and up and up. Will you look at that again come September? Will kids have to potentially wear masks when they go back to school?
Well, first of all, increasing numbers of children who are isolating, the 3% I mentioned earlier, is driven mainly by infection rates in the community. There's a correlation between the number of children who are asked to self-isolate because they've come into contact with somebody with COVID and the degree of infection in the community. We introduced face coverings for pupils in secondary school classrooms as a temporary measure. We reviewed that over Easter, and for May the 17th, it's no longer a recommendation. But of course, we do give discretion to directors of public health around the country, particularly in areas of high infection rates, to reintroduce or to maintain that recommendation in classrooms. And I think in about 60 local authorities in those high infection rates around the country, that there are recommendations to continue face coverings in classrooms. But it was a temporary measure. And as I said, the issue isn't about infections within the school. There are a huge raft of measures in place, so hygiene, ventilation, staggered breaks, and so on, to limit the risk of transmission in schools. This is about transmission in the community.
Will you be wearing a mask after the 19th of July, indoors?
Well, I wear a mask now when necessary. And
that's the law.
Yes, and I will. We'll see what is announced as we move to step 4.
Well, I spoke to several of your colleagues over the last couple of weeks, including George Eustace. He says he's not going to wear a mask after the 19th of July. And as you know, the Chancellor's also said the same. I just wondered what your view was.
My view is that I will adhere to whatever the guidance is that's announced leading up to step 4 of the roadmap.
So even if it's not a regulation that you need to wear a mask, you might still wear one?
I will wear whatever the recommendations are, the guidances to individuals about when and whether they should wear a face mask. We all have to do everything we can to minimise the risk of transmission. But you know, we want the roadmap to be a one-way journey. We want it to be irreversible, and we will look at the data. And I'm optimistic, the way things are looking at the moment, that the 19th of July will be the step 4 of the roadmap.
OK. Have you seen the video of Chris Whitty? I'm sure you have, being assaulted by some yobs last night. What do you think should happen to them? And do you think that he should have some form of protection? Because he obviously is dividing opinion. This is the videos we're talking to you. What do you think?
I think this scene is absolutely appalling, and I'm sure all your viewers and the general public will absolutely condemn the behaviour of these jobs. Chris Whitty has done a fantastic job throughout the pandemic in advising the government of the necessary measures to keep our NHS safe, to save lives, and he has, been a very effective chief medical officer during that period, and those scenes should not have happened. This is now a matter of police investigation, and I hope the whole weight of the law will come down on people that engage in that kind of behaviour.
Should he be afforded some sort of close protection?
Well, that is a matter for the security services and for Chris Whitty, but those scenes should never have occurred in our society. Absolutely wrong. People, whatever role they have in government, should be able to walk on the street, walk through the park, unaccosted by that kind of behaviour. It should not happen in a free, law-abiding society like ours.
Have you ever used a private email account for government business?
All business that I conduct goes through my private office. The Information Commissioner is clear that any key actions and decisions are recorded, and that's why all government action that I conduct takes place through my private office. How I communicate with my private office is through a range of measures, including mostly paper through the red box system.
So you've never used a private email account to carry out government business?
Well, I will talk to my private office through a range of measures, phone, text, email, but government business is conducted via the private office so that there is a record of all key actions and decisions that are taken, all government action, all government business takes place through that office.
How surprised are you that other ministers are not as fastidious as you when it comes to carrying out government business?
Well, I think all ministers do conduct business through their private office. It's how
private email accounts, as you know, Mr. Gibb.
I'm sorry?
Talking about private email accounts, as you know, and as we know, at least 2 ministers in the Department of Health have used their private email accounts.
Well, that's a matter for the Department of Health and to be
I'm asking you what your opinion is.
Well, the rules are very clear that all government action needs to take place through private offices, through formal channels, so that a record can be kept of those key decisions. And when there are people do, of course, have private conversations, and the key thing is that those private conversations are communicated to the private office so that they can then be, if necessary, recorded as part of the decision-making process.
Do you have a CCTV camera in your office?
Yes. No, I don't. I did ask the question, of course.
I bet you did. I bet you did. You saw Chris Bryant yesterday saying that Matt Hancock is the stupidest man on earth, snogging his mistress in front of a CCTV camera. It wasn't the smartest thing to do, was it?
Well, look, Matt Hancock has said that he breached the social distancing rules, and as a consequence, he felt that he had to resign, and that's what happened on Saturday. Matt Hancock has been, I think, a very good health secretary. He has managed this crisis, I think, the pandemic crisis, exemplarily, and we have kept the NHS safe. It hasn't been overwhelmed in that period, and we have one of the most successful vaccination rollouts in the world, with 85% of adults now having had at least 1 dose and 60% of adults having had 2 doses. So I would pay tribute to Matt. He took what he felt was the right decision to resign, and that decision was accepted by the Prime Minister.
He also employed his mistress at our expense.
Well, I'm a Education Minister. To be appointed a non-executive director, there is a process that's gone through with an appointment commissioner involved, and I'm sure that was the process that happened in the Department of Health, but I'm not close enough to all the details.
No, but she's his mistress, and we were paying her.
Well, what you want from a non-executive director is their expertise and experience, and that's what will have been sought in the Department of Health. But again, I'm not close enough to the process to know all the details. OK,
good to talk to you. Thanks for joining us on the programme this morning. Thank you. Still to come on the programme for you this morning, a deepening crisis. Leaders in the travel industry raised the alarm over COVID's impact on the sector in an open letter to the Chancellor and Transport Secretary. We'll speak to the chair of ABTA at 7:40. At 8:05, we'll hear from the Shadow Transport Secretary Jim McMahon as Labour calls on the government to protect reopening of society by securing our borders. A rivalry for the ages ahead of tonight's big game, joined by an England fan who's attended every game against Germany since 1990, and a Germany fan living here in the UK. I wonder how popular he is today. That's coming up at 8:30. Meantime, the government here might be confident it won't have to delay lifting restrictions from the 19th of July, but in Ireland, reopening may have to wait another 2 weeks. Currently, restrictions mean fully vaccinated people can meet indoors in private homes if there are no more than 3 households involved. This can include unvaccinated people from 1 household. Restaurants and bars can open for outdoor service for groups of up to 6 people, and gyms, leisure centres and pools can open for individual training. Let's get more now from our Ireland correspondent, Stephen Murphy, who's standing by for us. So, Stephen, it does look as though potentially Ireland might be the only country in the EU where you can't dine indoors.
Yeah, a bit of an outlier, all right. Yeah, you just went through some of the restrictions that have been eased, and certainly on a day like today, the sun is out here in Dublin. If you walk around the city centre here, say at lunchtime, you're going to see crowds and crowds of people sitting outdoors, dining, having their lunch, having a few drinks maybe, and it'll look like the place is buzzing. But that belies the fact that every single one of those pubs, restaurants, cafes, they're completely empty inside, and they're taking a huge financial hit. So one of the restrictions that people here have been looking forward most close to being relaxed was next Monday, which is July the 5th, the return finally of indoor hospitality, groups of 6 people being able to go into a pub or a restaurant. But now, and we're here at Dublin Castle just awaiting the Irish Cabinet meeting to get underway, now it's looking increasingly likely that that is going to be pushed back for at least another 2 weeks and possibly even longer. The reason being the Irish government has been given new data, new modelling from its team of scientific advisors that shows that if the indoor dining and people mixing indoors in groups were to get underway just as the Delta variant is beginning to take hold here in Ireland, you could see a scenario where possibly you would have an additional 2,000 extra deaths over the summer months, and the infection rates and the hospitalisation rates would increase by a significant amount. So now, despite the fact that Ireland, the Irish government is under quite a lot of pressure from the economy, from various business groups and so on to reopen, it now looks increasingly likely that at some stage today we're going to get an announcement from here, from Dublin Castle, that that date, July 5th, will be pushed back to at least, we think, July 19th, possibly even further, to allow the vaccination programme to continue. We may even see a situation where fully vaccinated people may be allowed under proposals to then be allowed to avail of indoor hospitality. And that would be the first time here in Ireland that you would see a situation where you would have that vaccination bonus, I suppose. But as you say, Kay, yeah, I mean, after Greece reopens indoor hospitality, Ireland, if this happens, will be the only country in the EU where you can't dine or have a pint indoors.
OK, Stephen, thank you. Other news for you. Did you see these pictures on Twitter overnight? Around 100 firefighters called to a serious fire near Elephant and Castle railway station in southeast London. Look what happened. My goodness me. That was yesterday afternoon. London Fire Service say 3 commercial units underneath the railway arches were affected. Metropolitan Police confirmed the fire was not believed to be terror-related. Thank goodness. Also making the news for you this morning, after a 5th day of searching, 2 more bodies have been recovered from the wreckage of a collapsed building in Florida, bringing the total confirmed death toll to 11. More than 150 other people are still missing. Last night, a twilight vigil was held to remember the victims in the town of Surfside in Miami. Can you even begin to imagine how those people must be feeling, hoping against hope that their loved ones will be found alive underneath all of that rubble? But as each day passes, less and less likely to happen. An NHS hospital which upgraded the type of face masks used by staff on COVID-19 wards, so a fall of up to 100% in hospital-acquired coronavirus infections among those workers. Addenbrooke's Hospital in Cambridge upgraded the masks used by staff on COVID-19 wards from fluid-resistant surgical masks to filtering face piece 3 respirators. Goodness, that's complicated, isn't it? With the change made in late December in response to its own staff testing data. Britney Spears' younger sister has said she's proud of the pop star for speaking out against the conservatorship overseen by their father. Jamie Lynn Spears comments mark the first time a member of the family has spoken out publicly in support of Britney Spears in her legal battle with Jamie Lynn, saying she had waited until her sister testified in court. Last week, Britney Spears told a court the conservatorship had been abusive.
If ending the conservatorship, if flying to Mars or whatever the hell else she wants to do to be happy, I support that 100% because I support my sister. I love my sister, always have, always will, as long as she's happy. So let's keep praying. That's all.
Andy Murray has won his first match back at Wimbledon since 2017. He beat 24th seed. Oh goodness, you know his name, don't you? Okay, I'm going to go for it. Nicolas Basilashvili. Thankfully, he was beaten in 4 sets, but not without a wobble, and said the game had been a mental battle for him. Now, Prince William and Prince Harry will both attend the unveiling of a statue of their mum, Diana, Princess of Wales, on Thursday. The brothers commissioned the piece to mark what would have been their mother's 60th birthday. Speaking earlier during an online ceremony for the Diana Award, the Duke of Sussex said his mother believed the youth had the power to change the world.
Later this week, my brother and I are recognising what would have been our mum's 60th birthday. And she would be so proud of you all for living an authentic life with purpose and with compassion for others. Our mum believed that young people have the power to change the world. She believed in your strength because she saw it day in and day out. And in the faces of young people exactly like you, she witnessed a boundless enthusiasm and passion. And I too see those same values shine through.
To Ethiopia now, where rebel forces in Tigray have moved into the regional capital of Mekelle following the withdrawal of government troops in a unilateral ceasefire. Let's find out more about that. John Sparks is in Addis Ababa to explain it to us. John, good morning. Tell us more.
Yeah, morning, Kay. This is a dramatic and a surprising turn in what is a really bitter and vicious conflict in northern Ethiopia. It's being fought by the Ethiopian government and the former leaders of the region of Tigray. And they retook the capital, Mekelle, yesterday, after a week of really fierce fighting. Ethiopian soldiers, federal police, interim government officials, they fled the city. And the national government, as you say, has declared a unilateral 6-month ceasefire. It's a real setback for the Ethiopian government. It's embarrassing as well. The Ethiopian Prime Minister, Abiy Ahmed, said last year that this conflict was essentially over. There was just some mopping up to do. But that clearly is not the case. The TPLF, they have released a statement this morning. There's no talk in their statement about any ceasefire. In fact, it reads like they mean to go on. They say Tigray will indeed become a graveyard of the unjust and unholy coalition of invading forces. But I think a really key question is this. What happens to the citizens on the ground in Tigray? Because they have suffered horribly. Thousands of people have been killed. More than 2 million people have been displaced. There is a famine in the region, says the UN, and there are allegations of mass killings and mass rape as well. And I am not sure how this shift in the conflict will necessarily help them, and they certainly need help.
OK, for now, thank you. Quick look at what's happening. Actually, we're going to go. Let me just tell you what's going to happen as far as the football is concerned. 5 o'clock tonight. Joe is standing by for us, as you can see. What's the weather going to do for us this afternoon at Wembley? Joe, good morning. Good morning.
Hello, good morning to you. It's looking a little bit grey, has to be said. However, we've seen these very unsettled conditions in the south over the past few days down to an area of low pressure, and that is now pulling away. So even though we've got the cloud, and we may see a little bit of patchy rain, particularly on the way to the match, it should end up being dry at the end. Let's take a look at the weather details.
Look forward to brighter skies. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Hello there, good morning. Yes, whether it's Wembley or Wimbledon, both of them looking to be rather overcast today. Chance of some patchy rain, but the emphasis very much more on drier conditions than we've seen in the past few days. And pretty lovely over parts of the north. Scotland, Northern Ireland, Northern England, seeing some lovely sunshine and temperatures similar to yesterday, 24 or 25 degrees Celsius. That's 77 degrees Fahrenheit. But it is still rather gloomy in these southern areas. Outbreaks of rain at times, very mild, muggy, close weather. Through the course of the morning, we could see the cloud thinning and breaking in some parts, but where we do get any brightness, we're also likely to see some showers developing. So always best of the weather up towards the northwest.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
As I was saying, one of football's great rivalries set to play out tonight. You knew that already, didn't you? England take on Germany at Wembley in front of 45,000 fans. It comes after world champions France were knocked out of Euro 2020 last night after losing 5-4 in a tense penalty shootout. Oh, please don't let it be penalties tonight. They lost to Switzerland. It looks as though they were quite pleased afterwards. The Swiss, of course. After winning the World Cup in 2018, the French were the favourites to win the Euros. But Switzerland will now go through to face Spain in the quarter-finals. Becky Cottrell joining us from Wembley. No, she isn't at Wembley at all, is she? She's in Bermondsey. Hello to you, Becky. What's going on behind you there? Looks great fun.
Yeah, talk about anticipation ahead of the game. If you come down to the Kirby Estate in south-east London, this is what you will find. Just look at all these flags of St George. Clearly, a patriotic bunch. As you say, this is a huge game for England tonight, the next chapter in their long-standing football rivalry with Germany. England haven't won a knockout game against the Germans since 1966, when they won the World Cup final at Wembley. And for manager Gareth Southgate, tonight will be an historical moment. He was part of the England lineup in the Euro semi-final in '96, and he missed a crucial penalty that meant his side were out of the tournament. So the pressure is on, but he says he doesn't want his team to be rattled.
I think you can make these things as big in your head as you want, really. It's a game of football. These boys have played hundreds of them. There is, of course, great excitement with fans and people tuning into the game. But we've got to trust in the way we prepare.
Yes, so the pressure is on, and that preparation that Southgate was talking about, that will of course include prep for a penalty shootout if it comes to that. Now, whoever wins tonight will go on to the quarter-final on Saturday in Rome, where they will face Sweden or Ukraine. Back to UK.
OK, lovely. That's fantastic. I think you need to go knock on some doors there, Becky, and we'll catch up with you a bit later on. Joining us, SNP's Westminster leader, Ian Blackford. Now, I don't want to rub it in, Mr Blackford, but I wonder who you might be supporting tonight.
I'm just looking forward to all the sport that we're seeing on television, Kay. I mean, you almost don't know where to look, because you've got the tennis on one side, the football on another. You know, I think everyone's really been lifted by the spectacle of the European Championships. The games have been fantastic, and I hope we have a good game tonight. I hope you all enjoy yourselves and you get what you wish for as well. You know, Scotland enjoyed being in the European Championships. We're out, and I hope everyone has the kind of joy and passion that we've had, and I wish England all the best tonight.
Oh, that's what we were looking for. And you know, you held us to a draw at Wembley. Well done, Scotland. Maybe better luck next time.
It was a good game. It was a good game. It was exciting. And by the way, it's good to see you back, Kate.
That's very kind of you. Thank you, Mr Blackford. You've got an urgent question before the game tonight, haven't you, of the government and its emergency COVID contracts. What's your argument?
Well, basically what we know is that the government has spent £560,000 of our money, UK government has spent taxpayers' funds on campaigning for the union in the middle of a COVID crisis, money that should have been spent on COVID. And the only reason that we know this is it's come out through court papers. So this is really a rather serious matter. I've asked for an investigation into it. I've asked for the government to reveal the details of their own polling. £560,000 on polling on the union is really quite a sum of money to spend. So I think the government's got to come clean. The Prime Minister's got to come clean, and Michael Gove, of course, who was responsible for this. But this is not a good look about a government that's doing things in a sleek way and an underhand way. Let's have some transparency, let's have some openness and have some honesty in politics.
Are you just attacking the government for the sake of it and playing the independence card again?
No, I'm not, because it's the government that's campaigning against Scottish independence by using public money in the middle of a pandemic against our interests. And if they're spending public money on this, there is a matter as to whether or not this is within the law. But certainly what the government should be doing is letting the rest of us see the evidence as to what they've uncovered.
Have you ever used a private email for government business?
I'm not in government, but certainly when it comes to parliamentary business, I use my parliamentary email for all parliamentary business. I would never dream of using any other platform, whether that would be other email addresses or any social media platforms. In fact, I'm always very clear with constituents that any parliamentary business should go through my parliamentary account. That's the right thing to do. We're held accountable, we're held open to scrutiny as it should be, and that should be exactly the same for every government minister. You were quite right to pick me up on that. I meant parliamentary, forgive me. Do you have CCTV in your office? No, not that I'm aware of. And of course, the House authorities have been in touch with all MPs overnight to reassure them. Of course, there's CCTV, as there should be, in the Houses of Parliament, but not in the offices of parliamentarians. I wonder if you might want to comment on what Chris Bryant said about Matt Hancock in the House of Commons yesterday, saying he was the stupidest man on earth. Well, look, at the end of the day, he's been caught out, and I think people are right. I think most importantly, Kate, people were really angered by his behaviour. Of course, everyone's entitled to a private life, but the fact is that this is a minister that's been telling people in England in particular as to how they should behave. People in the main have gone by the rules, and yet again we have a senior figure in government, the architect of much of the rules, just as we found with the Cumming situation last year, has refused to behave in an appropriate manner. And of course, it's not just about whether or not Matt Hancock is stupid. The Prime Minister seems to have made comments about him in the past as well. But knowing that he was in the wrong, knowing there was public anger, the Prime Minister didn't force him out of office as he should have done. And I think really a lot of this is about the judgment of the Prime Minister, not recognising the scale of the anger that there is there, but also suggesting that Matt Hancock could come back into government at some point. This is a Prime Minister that really doesn't seem to understand how the public feel about these matters.
But is it the social distancing issue that is troubling you more, Mr. Blackford, or is it the fact that he employed someone who was his mistress that the taxpayer was paying for?
Yeah, there are serious issues around that. There's a number of questions that have to be answered. But look, at the end of the day, all of us need to have confidence in the public health messaging. And for the person that was responsible for much of the messaging to be behaving in such a way to undermine the rules, to undermine faith and trust in what we should all be doing, in what is a difficult time. We all want to get through this. We all want to get to a position of safety. My goodness, delighted so many people are going to the football tonight at Wembley. But all of us need to make sure that we follow the rules, we follow the guidance, and more importantly, that we follow the law when we're asked to do so.
And just as far as Scottish schools are concerned, we were talking about English schools a bit earlier on, England and Wales. Scottish schools open in August. I think they've already broken up, haven't they, the kids in Scotland? Are you scrapping the 10-day isolation rule for school children when they come back?
I think these are matters that the Scottish Government is looking at. Everybody wants to get to a situation where people can have their freedoms, but of course within all of that school children can get the education that they deserve. We want to get back to normal, but we have to do that in a way that protects the health of the public as well, Kay. I think we're making great progress, albeit, of course, there is some concern about the level of the spread of the virus, but there's a real job to be done to make sure that we can get this under control, we get people back to normal as soon as we can, but from a position of safety.
And as far as Chris Whitty is concerned, I'm sure you've seen the pictures overnight, Ms. Blackford, of what happened to him. He was basically assaulted by some thugs in the park while another one of them filmed it. Obviously, it's a police investigation. Do you think that he should have some form of protection?
Well, I think, regrettably, we need to make sure that whether it's Chris Whitty or anybody else in his position that's really done an outstanding job of giving leadership over the course of the last 15 months. It really is reprehensible what has happened. Of course, we saw the pictures just a few days ago of one of your colleague journalists, Nick Watt, being attacked by a bunch of thugs as well. This is something that should concern all of us. And I'm calling on politicians right across the divide to make it clear that this kind of behaviour, this kind of thuggery is not acceptable, that people have to be held to account. I am concerned about the overall discourse in public life, Kay, about what happens in social media in particular. We need to raise our game, and we need to make sure that Chris Whitty or anybody else, as they go about their business, they can do that in a position of safety.
Just before I let you go, can people in the northwest, my home part of the country, come up to Scotland again now or not?
Well, you know that there are some restrictions at the moment, Kay, and all of us want to get to a situation where these restrictions aren't there. I can tell you that having come down from the Highlands yesterday, there are thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people that are visiting from south of the border. They're all very welcome, and we need to make sure that people from your part of the world, from the northwest of England, can get back to Scotland as soon as possible as well.
Fantastic place it is to visit too. It's good to talk to you. Thanks so much indeed for joining us. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you, Kay.
Thank you. Tamara's with us this morning. Good morning. Lots to talk about, Tamara.
Hi, Kay. Yes, there certainly is. I think schools is the key one. We now know that the government is looking at alternatives to this self-isolation policy, which is causing such havoc for parents and teachers, with children waiting for a call to say someone in their bubble has tested positive, so the whole class or the whole year group has to be off. And we heard from Nick Gibb that daily testing is being looked at as a possible alternative, although the government isn't confirming anything at the moment. 250,000 children off school at the moment.
And this is what I had to say.
We are conducting trials of possible alternative to self-isolation. What matters also is that we keep the schools safe. And if you go around our schools, you will see a raft of measures to reduce the infection rates within schools. So there's extra hygiene, there's staggered breaks, we keep children in bubbles, and there's extra ventilation in classrooms to minimise the risk of transmission. There are about 3% of students who are self-isolating at the moment, and that's lower than it was in the autumn. It's very important that families continue to test their children twice a week so we can identify children who do have COVID, and then they don't come into the school and spread that virus to other children.
That was Mr. Gibb speaking to us earlier. He also had a view on what happened to Chris Whitty last night.
Yes, Chris Whitty, the Chief Medical Officer, was filmed. His film was uploaded to social media, being harassed essentially by two young men. The police are now investigating that. He was walking around it in Westminster and they followed him. And we've already heard from the Health Secretary actually saying he thought the video was completely unacceptable and the men behaved in a disgraceful way. This is what the Minister Nick Gibb had to tell us about Chris Whitty.
I'm sure all your viewers and the general public will absolutely condemn the behaviour of these jobs. Chris Whitty has done a fantastic job throughout the pandemic in advising the government of the necessary measures to keep our NHS safe, to save lives, and he has been a very effective Chief Medical Officer during that period, and those scenes should not have happened. This is now a matter of police investigation, and I hope the whole weight of the law will come down on people that engage in that kind of behaviour.
So general shocked reaction to this video. Questions also about whether the Chief Medical Officer should get some form of security. Yeah. Now, that is not extended to very many people, just the Prime Minister and a handful of members of the Cabinet, not every single one of them, based on an assessment. But given his prominence over the last year and a half, he's one of the most familiar faces of the pandemic. There are calls for that to happen.
Indeed. Let's see what happens. For now, tomorrow, thanks very much. Thanks a lot. Talking about that throughout the course of the morning, of course. Meantime, the Travel Association, ABTA, has this morning written an open letter to the Chancellor and also to the Transport Secretary, urging the government for more support for the sector as it continues to struggle under COVID restrictions. Joining us is Alistair Rowland, the chair of ABTA and Group CEO of Blue Bay Travel. Hello to you. Good morning. Thanks for joining us on the programme this morning. What have you said in the letter?
Well, we've asked for a number of things, and it's not the first time, Kay, that we've been talking to government. We've constantly talked to government since March 2000. But, travel was the first into the pandemic to have serious issues. It's been locked down. Costs are now starting to increase, particularly travel agents and smaller tour operators have no cash. So we're asking for a number of things, an immediate review of the traffic light system, more countries added where we feel that they are safe, to introduce the rule that government are talking about in terms of removing self-isolation from amber countries and to remove the advisory from amber countries, and a tailored package of support, because outbound tourism has not been recognised really at all from government, where it will be the business that is last to recover in this pandemic.
OK. Just how badly affected has it been? Can we talk numbers?
Yeah, I think the sector has lost around 5,000 heads per month since March. We think that there's around 500,000 people employed in the sector. We think there's just under 200,000 that are jobs at risk or have already gone. So we are talking about really serious issues in that, there'll be no travel agencies and tour operators in the recovery, which is such a shame because the UK's tourism industry is one of the best in the world. It accounts for 2% of GDP. And government need it for the economic recovery. We just need to be recognised for the support that it duly should receive.
And what happens if, Alistair, you miss out on another summer of holidays?
I think, the market makes most of its money, Kay, over a 12-week period in the summer. And agencies are out of cash. They haven't been able to use furlough because they've had to look after consumers' bookings, so people have had to work, and there's no cash left. So, the agencies are having to support the cost of furlough and business rates relief as that's introduced. And, businesses will fail. Significant numbers of businesses will fail, thousands.
And as far as the traffic light system is concerned, how well has that worked? I know that you will say that you wanted more countries to be on the green list, but has it helped at all with the amber list being there? Because Labour said that it shouldn't be there at all. It should be green list, red list, nothing more.
Yes, well, there's a lot of logic to that. So, we worked as an industry with the Global Travel Task Force to create the traffic light system, but government didn't operate it the way it was designed. Otherwise, Portugal wouldn't have happened. And now there is an extension to the green list. They're immediately on the green watch list. So for consumer confidence, customers really don't understand what they can do or can't do and the testing requirements. So actually, more confusion generally, equals less bookings because customers just think that it's too difficult and they don't fully understand.
OK. Final thought before I let you go. What response have you had so far as the letter is concerned? Do you feel that that the government is more willing to listen to you now?
I've sort of pushed really hard consistently. We struggle with a lack of ministry in government. And, DfT support transport, so support airlines, but not the broader industry. So the travel industry generally has really struggled to gain any kind of support or traction with government. And we really hope this open letter is the start of the change of that so we can save this great industry of ours. OK, it's good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed for joining us on the programme this morning. Appreciate it. Thank you. I don't know if you've seen the video this morning of Chris Whitty being assaulted in the street. We'll show that to you in just a moment or two. In fact, here it is now. He was assaulted by two men in the street, filmed by another. The police are investigating. We've heard from Sajid Javid, who is the Health Secretary, within the last few moments. He says, I've seen the video of Chris Whitty being harassed. It's appalling and totally unacceptable. Chris Whitty works tirelessly on behalf of the country. We will not tolerate this sort of behaviour towards our public servants. The men behaving in this disgraceful way should be ashamed. More than that, I think you can see them quite clearly. I'm guessing that the police will have something to say about that. Chris Whitty being accosted and assaulted as he minded his own business walking around Westminster. That looks actually as though it's the Mall that he's crossing there with perhaps St James's Park behind him, but certainly I'm sure that the police... In fact, there was a police van there. Did you see that? Did you see that there's a police vehicle in the back of that shot? That's something that we'll be looking at in a bit more detail. Fewer than 1% of GCSE students in England study a book written by a non-white author in English literature lessons. That's according to new research by Penguin and the Runnymede Trust, which paints a stark portrait of the underrepresentation of authors from ethnically diverse backgrounds in the classroom. Shingi Mariaki has more for us.
At this school in South London, the bookshelves are changing. After a year of discussions about race, culture and identity, the English curriculum has been overhauled. The goal behind this new chapter? To empower the students.
When I took on the role, this was just after the murder of George Floyd, and there were lots of conversations about race and change. And while I didn't go onto the street to protest, one of the things I try and do every time there is an uprising is to think about how I can bring that into my classroom. How can I remind my students that their lives matter every single day?
According to new research, this teacher's approach is unusual, with the national picture a very different one. A survey by the Runnymede Trust in partnership with Penguin found 82% of young people in England did not recall ever studying a book by a black, Asian or minority ethnic author, while at GCSE, 1% of students studied a book by a writer of colour and just 7% read books by women. Students here say there are benefits to reading books that reflect their reality alongside the classics that make up the canon.
I love the literature, I love the Shakespeare, but I also loved Alice Walker. I also want my heritage to be shown in literature.
I'm fortunate that I go to a school like this because I still feel connected.
If we want the younger kids to actually take an interest in these subjects, it has to be tailored to them. We can't really tailor what a young child should read to what, a group of 50-year-old middle-class white old men think would be appropriate.
This author says some of the inspiration for his book, based on growing up gay in a Muslim household, came from a text he read in his school days.
I remember when I was doing my English GCSE, there's this one poem called Presents from My Aunt in Pakistan. And it was the first time anyone had ever articulated the sense that I felt of being too English for Pakistanis, for my Pakistani cousins in Pakistan, but also too Pakistanis for English society.
Reading about places and people closer to home could spark the imagination of a new generation of talent. Shingi Mararike, Sky News.
A heatwave has been sweeping across America's Pacific Northwest. Crews have battled raging bushfires in California as the United States West Coast and Northwest regions continue to experience an unprecedented heatwave. Temperatures hit a record of 46 degrees in Portland, Oregon on Monday, despite the average temperature for June being around half of that. And Canadians have been attempting to cool off after the country recorded its hottest ever temperature, 46.6 degrees, beating the previous high of 45 Celsius set in 1937. That was a long time ago, wasn't it? Australia now, where Perth and Brisbane have followed Sydney and Darwin in introducing snap lockdowns as authorities struggle to contain outbreaks of the Delta variant of coronavirus. Joining us now, Professor Michael Toole is an epidemiologist at the Medical Research Institute, the Burnet Institute. He joins us, as I said. Hello to you, Professor. Thank you for joining us. One of the challenges that Australia faces now is that I think only like 4% of the population have been vaccinated, haven't they?
Good morning, Kay, although the sun's going down here. We're finding ourselves in a very different situation than we were just 2 weeks ago. Over the last 12 months, or almost since October last year, we've had more or less zero community transmission of the coronavirus. We have had some outbreaks, but they were always in just one specific city or state, and that state government controlled them relatively quickly. But today, as you said, we have 4 major cities in lockdown and 3 others with additional restrictions, so mandated mask wearing. So we really haven't been here before, and we are very vulnerable. In fact, there are 3 issues that make this a kind of perfect storm for Australia. As you said, a very low vaccination rate, only 4%. We have a hotel quarantine system that now leaks regularly, on average every week, so that someone who has returned from overseas, has spent 14 days in quarantine, has somehow spread the virus to the staff or other guests, and then it's gone out into the community. And of course, the third issue is the Delta variant, which is spreading very quickly.
It certainly is. In fact, I think there's the issues. There was a hairdressers in Double Bay where 900 clients potentially have got COVID, a birthday party in Sydney, similar issues there. But as I said, there's only about 4% of the population that has been vaccinated. So what can the authorities do to try to contain this?
Well, it's going to be very difficult in the coming months, which of course coincide with our winter. We just don't have enough vaccine. We do produce AstraZeneca here in Melbourne, but as you know, this vaccine's been associated with rare clotting events, and it's now only recommended for people over 60. That leaves us with a single vaccine, Pfizer, and we simply don't have enough to ramp up the vaccination of the community. Things will get better in our spring, your autumn, in October, when we will receive a lot more Pfizer, we will get Moderna, and we'll probably get the newest vaccine, Novavax. So meantime, during the winter, to prevent further lockdowns like this, there's only one thing the government can do, and that is to fix hotel quarantine. We're a federation, and each state runs their own business. But the federal government does have authority under the Constitution to basically to make sure that this quarantine system is effective. So they could use that authority to bring all the states and territories together and come up with what I call a national code of practice that recognises how the virus escapes inside these quarantine hotels. And that's usually through airborne transmission. Someone opens their door to pick up their meal at the same time as someone else does it, and the virus spreads. And it may go to staff and then out into the community. So even though our numbers are very low by other standards, we only reported 25 new cases today, whereas in the UK, I think it was 23,000. But because of that low vaccination, we are still very vulnerable. And this variant, as you know, in your country, can spread extremely quickly.
Indeed, so we certainly do. Are there any lessons to be learned, do you think, from the way that the UK is trying to deal with the Delta variant for the government in Australia?
Well, I think there's two things we can learn from the UK at the moment. And one, of course, is in hindsight. We should have not been so complacent last year, and we should have gone in and ordered a basket of vaccines, not just two. But of course, we can't fix that now. But I guess, as I said, in another 3 months, we may be in a better place. What else can we learn? I think, testing. I just saw that you're going to test in schools. I think our schools are not well prepared when there is a lockdown.
Okay.
In most times we close schools.
Okay.
But I think we have to be better prepared.
OK. Professor, sadly, we are out of time, but a fascinating insight. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us, and good evening to you where you are. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you, Kay.
Outbreaks of the Delta variant in Australia and an appalling video. Stay tuned for more here on Sky.